Hi everyone, welcome to another class of our World Geography series. So this is our third lecture on World Geography. Earlier lecture we have covered the South America and the Central America. So today we are taking this part of the Caribbean Sea where we look into the Caribbean countries. So these countries are basically formed due to the collision of the North American plate with the Caribbean plate, and as a result, there is a formation of group of archipelagos which are called as the Caribbean islands. And as because they are formed due to collision of two oceanic plates, so we can come to a conclusion that all of these islands are prone to earthquake and are also volcanic in nature. When you come to this part of this world, there are two terms which are very popularly used. One is the Caribbean country, another one is the West Indies. So there's a difference between both of them. So if you look into it, they are differentiated from different perspectives, such as cultural, political, or geographical. Caribbean islands or Caribbean countries are basically these countries which are located in the Caribbean Sea. But when we talk about West Indies refers to three geographically located landforms or land masses, or you can say the islands. This part, if you look into, this is the Bahamas. So when you talk about West Indies equals to it consists of Bahamas plus it consists of Greater Antilles. So this part is your Bahama. This part from Cuba up to Puerto Rico. This is called as the Greater Antilles. And if you look into the small group of islands, this part is called as the Lesser Antilles. So plus Lesser Antilles. So West Indies consists of these three groups of island, and overall, if you look into this entire region, they are termed as the Caribbean countries or the Caribbean island. West Indies was also a term which was used by Christopher Columbus during those time period, and generally we'll hear this term of West Indies in the cricketing world, where you'll see the players from all around these islands, they group up and form one team, that is the West Indies team. Now, if you look into the major water bodies of these islands, the water bodies are such that on the left hand side of Cuba, here where it is uh, bordering with the, not bordering, it is near to the coastal lines of Mexico on this side. Here you will find a channel or a passage which is called as the Yucatan Passage. Now, if you come towards the northeastern side, that is on this side, see this part of Cuba is around 160 to 170 kilometers away from the coast of Florida or USA. Here you'll find Florida. So here there is a street which is called as Street of Florida, and Bahama is somewhat 80-90 kilometers away from Florida. Now there is a passage here between Cuba and Haiti. This passage is called as Windward Passage. Then there is another channel between Puerto Rico and Dominica Republic. This is called as the Mona Passage. And here on the southern side, if you see that there is a country called Trinidad and Tobago, and this country is near to Venezuela of South America. So here, if you see on this part, here you'll find the passage which is called as the Serpent Passage. So these are the major water passages in the Caribbean Sea. Here, if you look into its geographical location, you will see that these countries become very important in international or global diplomacy, as because here you'll find the Panama Canal. So if any ship has to cross the Panama Canal and they have to go into Atlantic Ocean, they will have to cross these countries. Okay, there is a pass through these passages. The ships will go into the Atlantic Ocean. So if there is any geopolitical instability or economic instability in these countries, so that puts a toll on the sea trade routes through the Panama Channel. So that is why these countries, though they might be very small in geographical location or they have very limited significance in the global geopolitics, yet they are very, very important. So you see, all of these countries, though they are in the Caribbean region and they are independent among themselves, but yet in all of these countries, USA has a very historical, and even presently USA has a good control over these countries. And to counter USA, what is China doing? This is called as check book diplomacy. That is, China is basically investing a huge sum of money in infrastructural development in these countries. Why? To check US's presence in this region. Now, this is called as checkbook diplomacy, and this was because of the Monroe or the Monroe Doctrine. That is, since 19th century, USA has been a kind of a guardian for all of these countries or for the entire island. So this is some historical significance of this island. Here, remember one more thing is that you'll hear a term called CARICOM. Okay, you'll hear a term called CARICOM. This is nothing but it is similar to EU, wherein you see in the European region, all of these countries, they have an open market or a trade, kind of free trade agreements among themselves for economic growth. Even here, similar to EU Union or European Union, here all of this country, they follow this international or intergovernmental agreement, which is called as CARICOM, wherein there is free movements of good among this country, and it is an open market economy for the countries here, just like the European Union. So remember this word CARICOM and Monroe Doctrine. Now, if we look into the geographical locations of this country, let us look into these countries and the related geographical phenomena with these countries. So, the first one we're going to start is with Cuba. Cuba is the largest country in the Caribbean island, and the capital of Cuba is your Havana. Now, you might have heard about the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, all of this started basically here in Cuba. In Cuba, in this region particularly, this region is called as Bay of Pig. And it is from this Bay of Pig wherein the entire story or the event of Cuban Missile Crisis happened. And from Cuba, you can refer to a very great personality, that is Fidel Castro, who was basically the person who uh, revolutionized Cuba and gave Cuba a new form of government or a new country which was recognized in the global world. In Cuba, if we look into, this is just near to the Tropic of Cancer, and thus Cuba enjoys a tropical kind of climate, which is similar to like South India, and you'll find a huge diaspora in Cuba. Particularly, this diaspora was brought to Cuba in the year around 1834. This is called as the Great Migration. That is, you remember before 1834, in 1833, there was this slave abolition, and after that, all of these slaves which were placed in Cuba for the cultivation of sugarcane, particularly, they refused to work. And as thus, the British government at that time brought in a lot of workers, particularly from UP and Bihar of India, and settled them in Cuba. Because the farmers of UP and Bihar, they were already good in cultivating sugarcane. So their knowledge and their skills were brought in and placed in Cuba, wherein Cuba became one of the world's largest sugarcane producer of the world. And that is why you will see that in Cuba, India's diaspora is extremely high, and also there is a cultural relevance or a cultural similarities of Cuban culture and the Indian culture, particularly the UP and Bihar region. Like there's a celebration of Holi in Cuba, then there's a taste of music which is called as chutney music, which is very popular in Bihar and UP. Next to Cuba, you'll find a country, Haiti, a very relevant country in terms of disasters. You might have heard about the earthquake and tsunamis in Haiti. The capital of Haiti is Port au Prince. Here, just below Cuba, you will find a country which is called as Jamaica, and the capital of Jamaica is Kingston. Now, Jamaica has been more popular because of the presence of, or the birth of few personalities, such as the Bob. You might have heard about Bob Marley. He was basically from Jamaica. You might have heard about Usain Bolt. He was from Jamaica. You might have heard about Chris Gale. This guy is also from Jamaica. So the capital is Kingston. Here you'll find a small island which is called as the Cayman Island, and the capital is Georgetown. Now remember, this island is under the governance of UK. Okay. Next, you have your Dominica Republic. This group of this island, which you see, is divided into two countries. One part is Haiti, the left hand side part is Haiti, and the right hand part is the Dominica Republic, whose capital is Santo Domingo. So this is the capital, is Santo Dominico, and it is in Dominico. Here you will find the highest mountain peak of this entire island, that is the Pico d'Orto, okay, or Mount Pico d'Orto. Now, as because this is one single piece of land, that is why Haiti and Dominica Republic, they are together called as the Hispanian island. So if you hear this term Hispanian island, is nothing but referring to Haiti and Dominica Republic. Then you have this island which is called as Puerto Rico. The capital is San Juan. Now, interestingly, out of all of these islands, there are a lot of islands which are under the governance of UK, France, and USA. This becomes very important because here there is a large population which are residing in Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico is under the US government. But very interestingly, that is, once they are born in this island, the citizenship of the child is automatically becomes a US citizen, but they do not have voting. They cannot vote in US election until and unless they are residing in USA. They will not vote for USA. Like if there's an election in USA, there will not be an election in Puerto Rico. Someone who is residing in USA can vote. But so this is a very interesting feature, that is, in spite of being under USA, they cannot vote. Then here there is one island which is called as the Bahamas. This is a very popular island for tourist destination, and the capital is Nassau. And this group of island has a very strong connectivity with USA, just because most of the USA, I mean Americans, they come to the Bahamas for their vacation, and the entire country, the Bahama, is developed by US agencies or US companies. Because if you look into the hotel resorts, they, most of them, like 80 to 85% of them, are not built by the local people, but they are built by the USA government or USA companies. Then from here onwards, these islands take a curvy turn, and goes towards South America. The reason being the plate here, that is the Caribbean plate and the North American plate, is also curve in nature at this part. And here there are numbers of islands. All total there are more than 4,000, 5,000 islands in this region. And here you will find countries such as the Antigua and Barbuda. And remember, Antigua and Barbuda is famous because of Vivian Richard, the famous cricketer. Okay, then you will find Barbados. Barbados is famous for the singer Rihanna. Rihanna is from Barbados. The capital is Bridgetown. Then you will have Grenada, and then finally you will have one country which is called as the Trinidad and Tobago. And out of all of this country, Trinidad and Tobago is basically the richest country. Why? Because in entire Caribbean island, this is the country where there are reserves of crude oil and natural gas. Okay, reserve of crude oil and natural gas, and particularly if you look into the economy of Trinidad and Tobago is based on mineral resources. And if I have to tell you some personalities from this country are like Sunil Narayan, the cricketer, Dwayne Bravo. So there are lot of famous personalities from this region. The rest other, they are primarily dependent on agriculture. Like if you talk about Cuba, Cuba is primarily dependent on agriculture, particularly sugarcane, tobacco. And you should know that tobacco cultivation in Cuba is so very popular that you will have the Cuban cigar, which is popular around the world, coming from Cuba. But apart from that, they have resources also. Like Cuba has the world's largest reserve of cobalt and nickel. Then Jamaica has the world's largest reserve of bauxite, which is an aluminium ore. But apart from this, all of these countries, they do not have major reserves. They are more relied on agricultural activities, particularly the crops which grow in tropical kind of climate, such as sugarcane, banana, rice, okay, citrus fruits, tobacco, and all of this. So this is the entire scenario of the Caribbean island. Now let us go into these countries one by one. The first one is your Cuba. The highest peak of Cuba is Pico Torcuno, which is somewhat around 2000 meters. And here, this is your Bay of Pig, like I told you about the history, wherein the Cuban Missile basically, I mean, it was the starting event where the US, they tried to conduct an operation against the Cuban government, and the operation started from this Bay of Pig. In Cuba, you will see that as because this entire country is covered with hills, and there are a lot of hill, I mean mountain peaks here. So the majority of the country has rugged topography, but yet on the side of the countries where there are good amount, there are significant amount of plain region. It is in this region where there is cultivation of this tobacco, sugarcane, banana, citrus fruits, rice, and etc. Along with that, you'll also find coffee, because in tropical region where there are mountains with good heights, there you can cultivate your coffee also. And Cuba is particularly famous from this particular event of Cuban Missile Crisis. Next to Cuba is your Jamaica. In Jamaica, the highest mountain is your Mount Blue Peak or Blue Mountain Peak. This is the highest peak, and the entire Jamaica is covered with mountains. I mean the volcanic island which was formed. And in Jamaica, you will see the economy is mainly like agriculture, like I said you, but also they have good sufficient reserves of bauxites. Apart from this, similar to Cuba, you will find the cultivation of sugarcane, cocoa, banana, tobacco, coffee, and other citrus fruits also. The next country to Jamaica is your Haiti, and on this side you'll have the Dominica Republic. And I have told you that these two countries, they're together called as the Hispanian Islands. Now Haiti, if you look into Haiti, you will see that Haiti has been severely affected by, you know, geographical phenomena or geographical events, particularly earthquakes. And you might have heard about the severe earthquake which happened in somewhat 2000 in Haiti, which was one of the devastating, similar to the Venezuelan earthquake which happened recently. And Haiti's economy is primarily dependent on agriculture, and they have very less mineral deposit, or they have very less natural resources. In Haiti, you will find some crater lakes and also some warm stream or warm lakes. Here in Haiti, this part of this Haiti is called as the Gulf de la Gonave. And on this side, you'll find the Windward Passage. On the south of Haiti, you'll find the Jacmel Bay. It's a small bay. You will not find this in your atlases, but if you look into detail, you'll find the Jamal Bay. Next to Haiti is your Dominica Republic. Now, this country, Dominica Republic, has the largest peak of the entire Caribbean island, that is the Pico Dorte Peak, and the capital is Santa Domingo. Here on this side, you will have the Mona Passage. Like I told you, the Mona Passage, which divides Haiti, that is the Greater Antilles, from the Lesser Antilles, because from here on you will find small islands until Tobago, which is divided by the Serpent Passage from the South America. Here too you'll have a similar climatic condition like the Cuban climate, or like the country Cuba, and thus you'll find cultivation of sugarcane, cocoa, cultivation of coffee, cultivation of banana, and etc. Interestingly, Dominican Republic, on this side it has high rugged topography of hills, but on this side it has some significant amount of plain region. Not, I would not consider them as a pure plain, but yes, their elevation is comparatively very low and they are good for agricultural activities. So you will find the cultivation of rice also in this region. Next to Dominica Republic, you'll find the country Puerto Rico. And just like I have told you, this country is under US governance, and anybody who is born in Puerto Rico gets the US citizenship. But however, they do not get to vote here when there is an election in USA. And these countries, if you look into very interestingly, like Cuba, then you have your Haiti, Jamaica, then you have your Puerto Rico, Dominico Republic. All of these countries, somewhere or the other, they are gifted with pharmaceutical industries and biotechnology. And Cuba produces some of the world's finest doctors around the world, and also the health facilities in these countries are pretty good. Now, what is the reason behind this is because of the ability of good education, which is supported by the USA, which was supported by the USA at one point of time, and somewhere or the other they developed with the pharmaceutical industries or the pharmaceutical companies. But however, all of these countries, they primarily depend on their prime agricultural resources, with few countries here and there with mineral resources, and from tourism. So there is a huge tourism industries which are flourishing in these islands. Next to Puerto Rico, you'll find the other small islands. So we'll finally go into Trinidad and Tobago. There are two groups of islands. The smaller one is called as the Tobago, and the larger one is called as the Trinidad. And the capital of Trinidad and Tobago is Port of Spain. And just like I have told you, this is the country which has one of the is among the richest country in the Caribbean island. Like Cuba is also pretty good, pretty rich, but this country is the one where there is reserves of petroleum, crude oil, and natural gases, and they earn a huge sum of money or add on to their economy through export of this crude oil and natural gas. On the left side of Trinidad, you will find a gulf which is called as Gulf of Paria, and on the south here you will find the Serpent Passage. Okay, you'll find the Serpent Passage. And if you go beyond that, you will get Venezuela of South America. And all of these countries, like I told you, they come under the similar, concept of EU, that is free trade and single market economy under the program called CARICOM. And this particular CARICOM was popularized or came into effect after the Treaty of Chagua Ramos or Ramas, which happened in 1973. Okay, and from there on, they basically started following this CARICOM under the model of EU trade and commerce, or EU economy, that is single market economy. But however, remember, as like I told you, China is playing this diplomacy game by giving huge sum of money for economic development and infrastructure. So you it should be kept in mind that though China is trying to put some influence or trying to make some presence in this Caribbean island, but it is USA who, for a long period of time, had control over this island or over this region. And even today, USA has a larger hand in controlling these islands, and USA decides which of the islands will make what kind of development. And thus you see that when they wanted this CARICOM to come into effect, USA did not want this to happen, and there was a lot of protest, and there was a lot of incidents wherein the countries were favoring, some countries were favoring CARICOM, some countries were not favoring CARICOM. It was extremely difficult, and finally all of them, they came together in one page, and finally CARICOM was successful. So this is all about your Caribbean island and some interesting things related to the Caribbean island. Now, lastly, if I come to the conclusion of our class, here in the first slide, you have seen the map of the Caribbean island. Now, when you look into this map, you will find here on this side is your USA, right? You'll have the Florida. This is the Florida region. Okay. And here, somewhere here in Atlantic Ocean, you'll find a small island which is called as the Bermuda Island, which is thousands of kilometers away from Caribbean island and thousands of kilometers away from USA. It is somewhere not exactly in the middle, but in the remote location of Atlantic Ocean. So if you just connect dots from Caribbean, from here, if you connect it with Bermuda here, from here, if you connect it to Puerto Rico here, and from Puerto Rico, if you connect it to Bermuda here, it forms a triangle. And this region is basically called as the Bermuda Triangle. And we know that this Bermuda Triangle is a mysterious triangle with a lot of unexplaining events happening, and all of these are not located in the entire region of the triangle, but somewhere in the pocket regions because of certain geographical and magnetic say reasons. Also, there are different theories regarding, we will not go into it, but this is what is your Bermuda Triangle. That is, you have to connect these three dots from Florida, Puerto Rico and the Bermuda Island. So if you are asked about Bermuda, it is not a part of Caribbean, it is an independent island in Atlantic Ocean. So that's all for today's class. I hope this was informative. Subscribe to our channel to keep getting such informative videos, because we'll be continuing the world mapping series where we will cover the entire globe. Okay, so till then, take care of yourself, and if you have any queries and any suggestions, please feel free to write in our comment section. So take care, guys.